You got 30 days to get your animals off this property, or we will have them forcibly removed. I'm standing on the front porch of the Ironwood, my family's legacy since 1948, staring down this woman who moved in 8 months ago and thinks she can evict me from my own land. Brenda Sterling, with a smile so aggressively polished it could scrape barnacles off a ship, clutched a clipboard like it was the 10 Commandments themselves. The air on the ranch that morning smelled of sweetgrass and honest work, but it was getting suffocated by whatever industrial-strength perfume she'd doused herself in. I swear it could probably kill scorpions at 100 yards. This wasn't just some neighborly spat, some small-time HOA complaint. No, this was about 55 acres of prime Oklahoma land that my grandpa bought with his Korean War service pay, land that still held the mineral rights oil companies had been circling like buzzards for decades. And Brenda here, this urban transplant in her athleisure outfit that cost more than my monthly feed bill, she thought she'd found herself a pushover. "Ma'am," I said, my voice low and level, "you do realize this is private property, right?" Her laugh. Oh, her laugh was a masterpiece of condescension. It could curdle fresh milk. "Not for long, honey," she chirped. "What do you do when some newcomer tries to steal your family's legacy? What do you do when a neighborhood bully with a clipboard decides your very way of life is a nuisance?" Little did Brenda know she'd just picked a fight with a guy who spent the last 15 years working as a senior policy advisor for the Department of Land and Community Relations in D.C. Let me back up and tell you how we got here. 6 months ago, I traded my government cubicle and the hustle of D.C. for a dusty pair of boots and a quiet sunrise over Willow Creek. Oklahoma, population maybe 7,500 on a good day, where everyone knows your business before you do, and the coffee at the local diner is strong enough to wake the dead. When my grandfather passed away and left me the Ironwood, it wasn't just a ranch. It was a homecoming. I traded the sound of sirens and traffic for the lowing of cattle and the song of a meadowlark. My boots crunching on the same gravel path my grandpa walked for 70 years, the air carrying that perfect mix of sage, mesquite, and the kind of peace you can't buy. Well, you can't buy it unless you're a developer who wants to steal it. Enter Brenda Sterling, age 52, real estate agent turned neighborhood tyrant. She moved here from Dallas after buying a soulless McMansion in Whispering Pines Estates, the new subdivision that had sprouted up next to my ranch like a suburban migraine. Within a month, she was HOA president, and within 2 months, she was wielding that clipboard like a scepter of absolute power. Her first violation notice appeared on my door 3 months after I moved in. "Agricultural nuisances that threaten property values," it read. Never mind that my family had been raising cattle here since before her neighborhood was an empty field. At first, I just laughed, figured it was a simple misunderstanding. I even invited her over for some sweet tea to talk it out. My first mistake. She showed up with her cousin Dale from county zoning, both armed with cameras and bad attitudes. They photographed everything: my chickens, my manure pile, Grandpa's old 1968 tractor that still ran like a champ. She kept mentioning forcing compliance, and that's when the penny dropped. This wasn't about a complaint. This was a war. And Brenda Sterling, with her artificially blonde hair that looked like it could survive a nuclear blast, had just picked a fight with the wrong rancher. She didn't waste any time escalating things. A week later, a thick manila envelope was taped to my front door. Inside was the most official-looking cease and desist notice I'd ever seen outside of a federal courthouse. The letterhead claimed it was from Sterling and Associates Legal Services, which I later found out was her kitchen table and a Costco laser printer. The document was a masterpiece of legal-sounding nonsense, demanding immediate cessation of all agricultural operations. It even included a crude map showing my ranch somehow encroaching on their territory. The audacity was breathtaking. The notice demanded I attend an emergency compliance hearing at the Whispering Pines clubhouse. Not a request, a summons. Like I was a criminal, I showed up anyway. Sometimes you gotta see how deep the crazy goes. The clubhouse conference room reeked of industrial air freshener, trying to mask the smell of old money and older prejudices. Brenda had arranged the seating like a kangaroo court. 12 HOA board members sitting behind a long mahogany table like inquisitors, with a single metal folding chair facing them. Guess where I sat? She had a PowerPoint ready titled Agricultural Operations Impact on Community Standards, full of dramatic photos of my property. My manure pile was a biological hazard zone. My chickens were disease vectors. Even Grandpa's faithful old barn was labeled a structural eyesore. Brenda announced, her voice bouncing off the wood-paneled walls. "Mr. Hayes, you've been called here tonight to address serious violations." Looked around at these people, mostly retirees and city transplants, who'd moved to small-town Oklahoma for authentic rural charm, but wanted to sanitize it. "First, ma'am," I said, settling into that uncomfortable chair, "I'd like to see a copy of these community covenants you keep referencing." The temperature in the room dropped faster than a lead balloon. Brenda's plastic smile flickered. "Those documents require legal review before distribution," she stammered, shuffling papers. "We can't just hand out proprietary information to outside parties." Outside parties on land my family had owned since before most of these people knew Oklahoma existed. It was time for my counterpunch. I pulled out my federal credentials and slid my business card across that polished table like I was dealing poker. "Well, Brenda," I said, "I spent 15 years writing housing regulations for the federal government. Maybe I can help navigate those legal complexities you're worried about." You could have heard a mouse sneeze. Half the board members suddenly found their shoes fascinating, and Brenda's face cycled through more colors than a traffic light having a seizure. "Here's something most people don't know. HOAs must provide copies of all governing documents to any property owner within their claimed jurisdiction upon request. It's federal law under the Fair Housing Act. Refusing to provide them is actually evidence of discriminatory practices." The meeting ended with Brenda promising to provide appropriate documentation after proper consultation. Translation, she was frantically trying to figure out how deep a hole she'd dug. As everyone shuffled out, a nervous woman with kindness in every line on her face, Lila Santos, approached me in the parking lot. "Mr. Hayes," she whispered, glancing around like she was planning a jailbreak. "Brenda's been lying to us about everything. The ranch, the legal authority, even the money." Her voice trembled. "I think she's planning something that could destroy this whole community. And that's how I found my first ally in what was about to become the HOA war of the century." Brenda wasn't about to let my little credential reveals slow her down. If anything, it seemed to light a fire under her designer yoga pants. Within a week, she launched a full-on bureaucratic siege. Monday morning brought Dale, her cousin, rolling up my driveway in his official county zoning truck. He looked as comfortable as a cat in a thunderstorm, clutching a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Someone had filed a complaint about unpermitted agricultural structures. Every barn, shed, and fence post since 1948 suddenly needed documentation that had mostly gone up in smoke during a barn fire 20 years ago. Tuesday brought the State Environmental Commission to investigate potential groundwater contamination. The inspector spent 4 hours taking samples, his expression growing more annoyed by the minute as everything came back cleaner than a preacher's conscience. Wednesday was my personal favorite. The state agriculture department rolled in to investigate diseased livestock. The veterinarian they sent, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Martinez, took one look at my healthy cattle and asked if this was somebody's idea of a joke. The diesel fumes from all these government trucks were starting to make my place smell like a truck stop. And I was beginning to see the real strategy here. Brenda wasn't trying to prove violations. She was trying to drown me in inspection fees, legal costs, and wasted time. Make compliance more expensive than surrender. I'd seen this tactic during my DC days when unscrupulous developers wanted to clear out problematic residents. That's when Lila Santos showed up at my ranch Thursday afternoon, her little Honda Civic kicking up dust as she fishtailed into my driveway. "I haven't slept in 3 days," she said, her coffee cup rattling against her wedding ring as she sat on my porch steps. "I couldn't live with myself if I didn't tell someone the truth." And Lila had brought presents, the kind that could land people in federal prison. Text messages, emails, bank statements. A paper trail that painted a picture uglier than Brenda's attempt at natural-look highlights. The whole HOA crusade wasn't about community standards. It was about cold, hard cash. Apex Land Partners, the company developing Whispering Pines, had been feeding Brenda inside information about my ranch for months. They wanted my 55 acres for Phase 2 of their subdivision, and Brenda was set to collect a hefty finder's fee plus first pick of the premium lots if she could force me to sell. The entire agricultural nuisance campaign was just a show designed to cover up what amounted to legal theft. But the real bombshell was in the HOA formation documents Lila had smuggled out. As I read through the incorporation paperwork, I nearly spit my coffee all over the kitchen table. The requirements for a legally established HOA are crystal clear. Articles of incorporation filed with the state, covenants recorded with the county, proper legal establishment before any enforcement authority exists. Brenda's HOA had skipped every single step. They were operating with as much legal authority as my chickens. "Lila," I said as gently as I could, "your HOA was never legally established. You've been operating as an illegal organization this entire time." The color drained from her face. "You mean everything we've done has no legal standing whatsoever?" she whispered. "Brenda's been running a con game," I finished, "and she's used your community as unwitting accomplices." That evening, I sat in Grandpa's old leather recliner, surrounded by Lila's evidence. Outside, the coyotes were starting their evening chorus, and the gentle sounds of cattle settling down filled the air. These were the peaceful sounds that reminded me exactly why this land was worth every fight. I was beginning to understand this wasn't just about saving my ranch. Brenda had turned harassment into a profitable business model, and there was no telling how many other families she'd already devastated. Time to make some phone calls to my old colleagues in D.C. If Brenda wanted to play in the federal leagues, she was about to discover what happens when you pick a fight with a guy who helped write the rule book. Brenda must have sensed the walls closing in, because her next move was straight out of the manipulation playbook. When you can't win on facts, manufacture a crisis. Monday morning brought what appeared to be federal agents to my door. They had official-looking badges, government-issued windbreakers, and an emergency health department closure order that looked authentic enough to fool most people. The lead agent was a middle-aged man with a cheap suit and nervous energy that screamed, "Actor between gigs." His partner looked like she'd gotten her federal training from YouTube videos. They showed me documents claiming my ranch posed an immediate public health emergency and demanded I evacuate all livestock within 24 hours. The paperwork was beautiful. Forged government seals, official-looking letterheads, even fake EPA registration numbers. "Gentlemen," I said, keeping my voice perfectly calm while my security cameras recorded everything, "could you explain which specific federal statute gives the EPA authority to close privately owned agricultural operations?" The lead actor shuffled through his fake papers, sweating. "Under the, Federal Emergency Health Protection Act." There is no Federal Emergency Health Protection Act. I helped write half the housing and environmental regulations these people were supposedly enforcing. "And could you provide your federal credentials for verification?" I continued, pulling out my phone. The panic in their eyes was beautiful. They started backing away, stammering about an error in our paperwork. Meanwhile, real federal agents were watching this entire performance from concealed positions around my property. My calls to D.C. had triggered a multi-agency task force investigation, and they'd been monitoring Brenda since Saturday. The fake federal raid was being recorded by actual federal agents. Within an hour, Brenda was posting on social media about her successful federal intervention with staged photos of my ranch. She was celebrating a federal crime as a personal triumph. Her delusion was truly impressive. But the real catastrophe came that evening. My security system captured everything in HD as Brenda and two accomplices showed up at my ranch. She was directing them to open my cattle gates, her voice clearly audible as she instructed them to assist with the federal process by releasing my animals onto the public road. She was attempting livestock theft while claiming it was law enforcement. That's when Sheriff Redford arrived with backup, apparently having received an anonymous tip about suspicious activity. The sight of the patrol cars sent her accomplices scattering like cockroaches. "Brenda Sterling," Sheriff Redford announced, stepping out of his patrol car with the weary satisfaction of someone finally ending a long-running problem. "You're under arrest for criminal conspiracy, livestock theft, impersonating federal agents, and about 6 other felonies. We're still counting." The handcuffs clicking shut on Brenda's wrists had the most beautiful sound, like justice finally being served with a side of cosmic irony. She'd spent months trying to have me arrested on fake charges, and now she was going to jail for very real crimes that she'd committed in full view of multiple cameras. As the sheriff read her rights, she kept screaming about federal authority and government conspiracies, apparently still believing her own fabricated narrative, even as it collapsed around her. The next evening, I sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint my family's land in shades of gold and amber. The air smelled of sage and fresh grass, clean and honest. Nothing like the toxic atmosphere Brenda had tried to create with her lies. She had played every card in her deck: legal intimidation, media manipulation, vandalism, false police reports, and finally, outright fraud using fake federal agents. Every desperate move had just provided more evidence for the federal case that was about to destroy her criminal enterprise permanently. 6 months later, I'm sitting on my porch, drinking my morning coffee on land that no developer will ever touch. Brenda Sterling is currently serving 15 to 20 years in federal prison after pleading guilty to a laundry list of charges that reads like a criminal law textbook: wire fraud, mail fraud, conspiracy, civil rights violations, impersonating federal officers, and my personal favorite, violation of the RICO Act for operating a systematic criminal enterprise. The federal government, turns out, takes a very dim view of people who turn land theft into a business model. The real victory, though, is what happened to the community. The residents of former Whispering Pines, now calling themselves the Willow Creek Neighbors, formed a legitimate homeowner association with proper legal standing. Lila Santos serves as their first elected president, bringing the same methodical approach to community leadership that she once used to manage a third-grade classroom. I used my settlement money from Brenda's harassment lawsuit to establish the Caleb Hayes Community Defense Foundation, which provides free legal assistance to rural families facing systematic harassment from corrupt HOAs or developers. My grandpa's legacy survived, and it'll be here for another 70 years at least. The irony is beautiful. Brenda thought she was targeting some helpless country rube who didn't know his rights. Instead, she picked a fight with a guy who'd spent 15 years writing the very federal regulations designed to stop people exactly like her. Her systematic harassment campaign became a masterclass in why bullies should always research their targets before declaring war. Now I want to hear from you folks. Have you ever had an HOA nightmare story? What do you think about people who use their power to manipulate and steal? Drop a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And if you're dealing with systematic harassment, don't suffer in silence. There are federal resources available to help. Sometimes all it takes is one phone call to the right agency to turn the tables completely. And trust me, those stories are coming. Remember, folks, bullies count on you not knowing your rights, but when you do your homework and stand your ground, they fold faster than a house of cards in a Texas tornado. Knowledge is power, and power properly applied is justice.